Paddy Joe Hill from the Birmingham Six.
Good evening, everyone. As you heard, I'm Paddy Joe Hill, one of the Birmingham Six. It's a name that I never asked for, but it's one that I've got and I wear it with pride. I left school. I was born just round the corner from Jerry in the Falls Road. And then we moved up into Ardoyne, a little Catholic enclave in the north of Belfast called the Ardoyne, more commonly known amongst us as Murder Mile. It's only about a mile square. I was very fortunate. I left school in 1959. And a few months later, my family and I took me over to England, to Birmingham. And of course, I got into a lot of trouble. I was in trouble in Belfast before I fucking left, but I got into a lot more trouble in Birmingham. In Belfast, it's all gangs and what have you. And of course, when we left Ardoyne, we had to go through all the Protestant districts. So it was like one of them, that film, like the American one, The Warriors, when I had to go through one side of New York to the other. That was us in the north of Belfast. And one of the reasons why I got into a lot of trouble in Birmingham was because when I moved in 1960, used to have big signs on the factory walls. Vacancies, apply within. And the next day, they had another big sign. No paddies and no wogs need apply, we don't employ them. And of course, me, I tell everybody, I'm Irish, I'm green, I'm Republican, and I'm fucking proud of it. And the reason why we left Belfast was because of bigotry and discrimination. When I left school in '59, the first job I went in to see the personnel manager. And the first thing he said to me, what school did you go to? And I said, Holy Cross. And he says, get the fuck out of my office. We don't employ Fenians. That was my first experience of asking for a job. But of course, when I went to Birmingham, I have, by the way, I come from a very, very heavy British military family. My father served 30 years in the British Army. My father was the regimental sergeant major, the unarmed combat and weapons instructor for the British Army in the north of Ireland for 15 years. He left it in 1959. I'm the second oldest of six. 5 boys and 1 girl. I've got an older brother. The week that my father left the British Army, my older brother joined it, because that's all he ever wanted to do, was to join the British Army. Me, I was the opposite. I didn't give a fuck who told me what to do. I wasn't going to do it. I could never take orders. I had a mind of my own, and I don't believe in anybody thinking or making decisions for me. I make my decisions. If they're wrong, so fucking what, at least I made them. Nobody else made them for me, and I stand by my decisions. But I had 3 young brothers and sisters to look after in Birmingham, and I got into a lot of trouble. One of the first things I got into trouble for was beating up a schoolmaster, because he beat my young brother up. He couldn't understand the language. We talk very fast, Belfast people, when we're together. It's like a fucking machine gun. Blah, blah, blah. And of course, they started making fun of my brothers and sisters in school, and I went up to the schoolmaster and ended up knocking the bollocks out of him. Anyway, he ended up in hospital. I ended up in the jail, as usual. And of course, by the way, as I say, I wasn't a good guy. I've got, I think it's 16, 17 previous convictions. Out of the 6 of us, I was the only one that was prepared for prison, because I'd been there before. But by the time 1974 came around, the Birmingham pub bombings, I was a happily married man. I gave up all the gang shit and what have you. I got married. I met a girl in Birmingham beginning of the 60s. She was only 14 years old. I was 17. I married her when she was 18. And I say we have 6 kids. I've got 5 daughters and a son. My son is the youngest one. I wish the fuck he'd have come early, because if he had been, there wouldn't have been 6 of them. Believe me. And I mean it. My wife made a promise when she was carrying the first one to my uncle that she would have a son and she would call him after him. That's why he's called Sean. And I had to say, I wish he'd have come earlier. But anyway, I had 6 young kids. On the night of the Birmingham pub bombings, we were going home, me and 4 friends. We all come from a little Catholic enclave, as I said, called the Ardoyne. 3 of us grew up together. And 2 of the other ones, Hughie Callaghan and Richard McElkenny, they're about 12 years older than us. They knocked about with my uncles at home. But we all came from the same little Catholic enclave. Anyway, we were going home that night. And of course, when we got to the boat, we heard, I was the one that got through the boat. I got through. When you come off the boat at Heysham, it's a big corrugated iron thing and a wee door. And everybody's getting off about 6 train coaches, heading for this door. I was one of the first ones through it. And if you listen to the police version, they talk about a big dragnet, etc., etc. And they try to tell the court at our trial that they caught us fleeing the country. Well, let me tell you something. You see the coach that we were on? The people in the coach for us were pissing themselves laughing, because when we get together, there's no holds barred. Everything goes. If you can't defend yourself verbally, you're in serious fucking trouble with us, believe me, because we don't stab you right away. And we had a great time. And when we came through, the security barrier at Heysham was 6 little tables that you see in a coffee bar. And behind each one there was 2 cops, one in uniform, one in plain clothes. Anyway, I went up to one of them. Blah, where you going? Where you going to? Told him. And the plain clothes cop says to me, would you mind coming into the office? And I says, where is it? He says, it's behind you. It was this little porta cabin like you see in a building site. And his name, by the way, was Detective Constable Fred Willoughby of the Morecambe and Lancashire Police Force. An absolute gentleman. Anyway, we goes into this little office and he's asked me a few questions and I've answered him. Then he says to me, do you owe the courts any money? I said, no, any money I owed the bastards, I paid them. And he started laughing. I says, what are you laughing at? He says, well, if you paid the courts, then I know you've got a criminal record. Then I started laughing. He says to me, what are you laughing at? He says, let me get something straight with you, mister. There's only one thing in Ireland that's green. That's the grass, not the fucking people. Don't take me for it, because I got no respect for nobody. Fuck you. Just because you're a cop, go fuck off. I had enough run-in since I was 15. Anyway, me and him had a crack. We went up and I got on the boat and I heard about bombs going off. But as Jerry said, bombs going off in Birmingham didn't mean nothing to me. In 18 months, there was, 68 bombs in 18 months. So to me, it was just another bomb. And then, of course, Detective Constable Willoughby came on the boat and he asked me to come off, and I went off the boat with him. And it was then that I heard that bombs had gone off. In fact, I never forget the cop's actual words. He said to me, excuse the pun. He said, you know how things get blown up out of proportion when something bad happens. But I'm going to tell you now, bombs have gone off and people have been blown up. The first thing that we've heard is that up to 20 people dead and over 200 injured. Have you any objection to seeing the Birmingham police? And I said, no. No problem. What time's the next train back to Birmingham? He said, there is none. But don't worry about it. Somebody come down and take a statement off you. Anyway, I sat in the boathouse and I waited there, and at 1 o'clock that morning he came back and he said to me, we're closing the boathouse. Do you mind going down to the police station? I said, no, where is it? He said, Morecambe. I said, how do I get there? He said, don't worry, Paddy, I'll give you a lift down in a few minutes. And he did, him and his mate, Sergeant Watson. And I remember getting out of that police car on my own free will, and I still remember walking up these 2 little flights of steps into that police station. And that was the last steps of freedom that I took for 16 and a half years. I sat beside the door for an hour. I could have walked out of the police station anytime I wanted. I made a detailed statement to them, and they came back at 6:30 that morning and told me that everything that I had told them was perfectly true. I'd been cleared by Spicer Branch in the Midlands, who told the Haitian police to let me go because they knew who I was. And we had nothing to do with it. We were also cleared by the intelligence services in the north of Ireland, in Belfast. They told the Lancashire and Morecambe police force, let them go. We know all about them. They're not involved in the IRA or in republicanism. Everything changed in Morecambe police station. I've already made a detailed statement, and I'm sitting there reading the book, and my introduction to the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad, I'm sitting on a bench reading the book, Alistair MacLean book, Bear Island. I'd read it before, so I'm just skip reading it while I'm waiting to be interviewed by the Birmingham police. And all of a sudden, a big shadow loomed over me. And I looked up, and this guy is there. He's about 6'2", 6'3", silvery hair, and he's rubbing his hands, and he went, soon, you little bastard. You dirty little murdering Irish fuckpig. And he spat in my face. That was my introduction to the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad. Shortly after that, I went in and had tests of my hands. Yeah, you could take what you want. I ain't worried. And then when I come out of the room, Bennett, the cop's name was Sergeant Ray Bennett of the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad, and his mate, the Constable Jeff Brand. And as I came out of the room, he said to me, stand there, and I stood against the wall. And a few minutes later, the scientist, Dr. Scooch, left the room with his assistant, a fellow called John Patton. And they walked down out of the cell area. When the bottom door went, Bennett says to me, in there. And as I walked into the room, bang, on the back of the head, and I went flying through the door. And all I heard was somebody screaming, don't mark his fucking face, don't mark the bastard's face. That was at 5 to 9 in the morning. And then they started playing football with me. They were kicking me up and down the floor, dragging me round by the hair. And they kept stamping on your arms, on your wrists, on your ankles. And they're giving you all sorts of abuse about your wife, your daughters, your mother, your sister, etc., calling them whores, etc. And then my mother, God rest her, my mother said to me when I come out of jail, said, son, don't be bitter. Bitterness is like a cancer, it eats you up from within. And I had a terrible hard time trying to tell my mother before she died, I'm not bitter against every police officer, but by fuck I am bitter against the West Midlands Serious Crime Squad. And the reason why, Sergeant Bennett picked me up off the floor and he slammed me into the chair and he said to me, and his words are burnt in my fucking brain, and he turned around and he says, quote, we know you didn't do the bombings. We don't give a fuck who done them. We have got our orders. And he went over to his pocket and he pulled a bit of paper out and he pulled my head back and he says, here, read the fucking orders, look what it says. We are to get confessions and convictions, and we're to use any means that we have to get them. Now, you can have it the easy way. And he handed me the statement forms. And he said, sign under there and sign in the bottom right-hand corner. We'll fill them in or you can help us. That's the easy way. If you don't want it like that, you can have it the fucking hard way. And he done that there with his fingers, says, round the walls. Now, what do you... And I said, I ain't signing. And that's as far as I got. I was knocked off the chair, punched, kicked. They give you the thunderclap treatment. And they carried on like that until 5 o'clock, and they brought us back to Birmingham. And on the way, when we left Morecambe Police Station, I met another cop, Detective Chief Inspector John Moore, who was the second in command of the 16-man operation. And he got in the car with me. Bennett was in the back of the car with me. Brand was driving. And Moore's in the front passenger seat, and on the way down the motorway, he pulled his gun out. And he turned round in his seat and he says to me, listen, I've had enough of fucking you. Either you're going to sign a statement or I'm going to blow your head off. And he started fiddling with his gun, and I swear to God, I still think he fucking loaded it. And then he turned round and he says to me, open your mouth. And I wouldn't open my mouth, so he hit me on top of the head with the barrel of the gun. I went, ah, and he rammed the gun into my mouth. Then he started running around my teeth like this. That's why I got no teeth. All my teeth are false. And then he turned around and he says to me, I'm going to count to 3. If you want to sign a statement, blink your eye. And he went 1. Then he cocked the gun, 2. And the count to 3. And I can still see now, even as I'm standing here talking to you, I can still see the hammer of that fucking gun falling. And it seemed like an eternity. Then you heard the click.